Okay. Just
Hey, Ed, there we go.
several little things on the screen were delaying me.
All good.
Right. So, are you going to kick off or?
Oh, yeah, yeah. If I wasn't sure your eyes still seemed to track something, and I wasn't sure if you're still looking for something on the screen.
No, I think I'm ready and relaxed now.
That's good to know. Yeah, we had this past Sunday an intentional society call, and I mentioned to a number of people that I'm interested in the topic of aliveness, and you volunteered graciously to have a conversation with me. Um, and I'd be happy to start with what's alive for me right now, if that's okay with you, or
No,
you
no,
can start.
no, you start. Yeah.
I start. Ah, what's alive? I had a number of calls today with people, and I still feel that I'm a little bit in more problem solving mode right now, but I'm trying to settle into my body experience to really get a sense of what is going on for me. I'm feeling ever so slightly nervous. This is the second call for this series. But I'm also excited because Ed, one of the things that you have, yeah, I would say, consistently provided me with over the years of, meeting you at intentional society calls is a kind of playful energy of like how to look at things with like a fresh set of eyes and to just provide a somewhat different perspective. And yeah, so I'm curious where our conversation may go. So
Yeah, me
that's
too.
alive for me right now.
Okay. Well, I'm a bit nervous about it as well. Um, Partly because what's alive? Yeah. So there are different phrases like what's alive for you now, which is often used as a prompt for what we call check-ins when that's an intentional society. Um, I see for the first time that behind you there's the word choosing aliveness. So that's another interesting phrase. Um, I'm So I had been thinking because I knew this interview was coming up. If it's an interview, I'm not conversation. Um, I've been thinking, well, what can I say about aliveness? um, it's like, and I've had quite a lot of thoughts going through my head of that kind of analyzing it, analyzing the language, so on, which for some people might not be what their idea of aliveness is. Um, uh, but uh, for instance, there's alive, and then there's aliveness, and they're not necessarily. It's slightly different because aliveness suggests a quality, perhaps a dimension, like darkness and light. Aliveness and deadness, I suppose, would be the obvious um, opposite. and but not all Ness words have an opposite. So I was thinking of redness, for example. It doesn't have a clear opposite, because when people say to me, "How are you?" You know, if I meet,
Mhm.
"How are you?" And one of the things I try to answer in present time. You know, rather than just using a cliche like "fine" or something. I try to think, "Oh, how am I?" And I quite often say, "Well, I'm alive," uh, and which has a kind of a special meaning for me in the sense that because I'm 78 now, and I'm like, you know, so it's there's maybe a twinkle in my eye when I say it, little like, "Yep, I'm here," and obviously the other person is alive as well, or I wouldn't bother to talk to them. Dear. Um, so yeah, that's one thing, and also I've just been talking to an old friend, who I knew from years ago, um, who's wanted to have a phone call with me. She's in France, and I gave her a window, you know, which stopped when this began, and she kind of slightly annoyingly, it was 4 hour window, and she chose to call right at the end of it. But once I get talking, I can sort of talk almost endlessly. So in a way, to make this a proper conversation. Um,
Yeah, I'll trust Ed that you will give me some openings as well.
well, yes, I don't know how good I am at that, giving openings, because I start to follow threads in my own head, sort of thing, and I probably forget about the other person being there. Um,
Mm,
but yeah, alive. I was also thinking about a song I wrote, um, which might convey something about this concept of aliveness, which is it went like this: that the spirit just wants to live. She don't care about winning or losing. Don't bury your heart in a bushel of cares. Just go for your wildest dreams. So that's a kind of possible way of talking about what does aliveness mean. Oh, and another one was not a song by Robin Williamson of the Incredible String Band, who's one of my sort of gurus, uh, which is just a phrase from a song, which is stranger than that, we're alive. So basically, it's just like the fact that's just states all the strangeness of the fact that we are alive, which kind of almost precedes every other bit of scientific or artistic knowledge or ignorance that you can have, you know. And but this idea with my song about the spirit just wants to live, it's like, and I would associate that with this feeling of lightness, um, as opposed to like deadness, and don't bury your heart in a bushel of cares. But I think I do that. I do bury myself in sort of in thoughts anyway, you know, and it doesn't feel so alive.
Hmm.
And usually, I mean, if you're on a walk, then in nature or something like that, that aliveness can come about. Or if you're engaged in some sort of um, uh, something with other people, and again in real life, more than on Zoom and so on. And if there's stuff happening, in a way, like it doesn't. That's the important thing is it doesn't matter whether you're winning or losing. It's the important thing is you're engaged in that. Some people would call it game in that game, that
Hmm.
story journey. I don't know. What do you think? And what have you already learned about aliveness from the other interview and your own thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. As much as I could go there now, I want to spend a little time on what I am learning right now. And especially kind of like the song and this kind of pursuing one's wildest dreams in juxtaposition or like on the other side of getting lost in some kind of thoughts and care, this kind of anxiety inducing loop of what could go wrong, let me figure that out first, rather than just just start walking. You know where you want to go, just walk. And yeah, like this huge difference. And I'm like, one of the questions that has come up for me from the things that you said, how do I differentiate dreams, like reliably I differentiate dreams from nightmares, let's say, because I think they're ultimately somewhat like related, right? They're going on in the imagination, and they may sometimes blend one into the other. um and then, yeah, just to answer your question, so the conversation I had was with Helen, and um yeah, we talked, I think, primarily around the flavors of aliveness and what are some of the situations where the feeling that I have about something outside of me may mislead me, where I feel, ooh, that feels very alive, engaging in something or with someone, but in the end, it turned out to be some sort of trickery, or like, where my where someone understood about me what makes me feel alive, and then they were able to like lead me somewhere where I actually don't want to go. So to just be aware that it is a very good sense to have. It feels good to feel this kind of pursuing one's wildest dreams. It feels good. And that there are situations in where people figure out how to use that to kind of pull you somewhere where ultimately you end up where you don't want to go. Let's say you become part of a mob, where it feels like, yes, we need to do this, whatever it is. Throw paint at paintings, or like soup at paintings. But is that really the kind of aliveness that you think is when you step back for a moment that you want to pursue? And maybe it is. Maybe that's exactly the kind of aliveness you want to pursue, or maybe not. But and I think it's related to this kind of pursuing dreams while also still have some sense of like what else is going on, but not to get caught up in thoughts. And then just briefly, one of the things that you mentioned is having the experience of tracking things in your head, or tracking things in your mind or memory. And I was just really realizing, yeah, I can feel completely alive with my inner experience. Even if I close my eyes and think of how nice my vacation time somewhere was, it can make me feel very alive without there being anything outside of me. But very often, I think I feel more alive when there is something outside of me that seems to relate to me in a certain way.
Mm. Ah, yes. Well, I'm not, quite a lot of the time, I don't feel more or less alive. So if someone asks me, how alive are you feeling now? They just the same as always. And that sometimes, I'm not saying that's 100% how I am, because if I start thinking about it, then there will be some times that, okay, yeah, that was, or that could feel, or I could feel more alive right now if I slightly change something. For one thing, there's breathing the air. So I'm indoors at the moment, and it's quite easy for me to walk outside, and there's a lot of greenery immediately in front of me. So the air tends to smell literally alive, um, in a way that the air inside the house doesn't. Um, so I could make that kind of comparison. There's a word they use in, I can't remember whether it's the creed or something in my Christian upbringing. Um, he comes to judge the quick and the dead. So the word for alive there is quick. Um, and that was, um, I think it's a bit old fashioned. So when all those prayer books were written 300 or 400 years ago, and but people did talk about things being quickened and so on, meaning that they were alive. Um, and the opposite of that, I guess, is when people talk about a dead weight, with um, heavy, uh, feeling like you're burdened down with something. But so the state that I think I'm normally in, of equally alive as usual, is there is a certain weight. So I'm not free floating and flying, um, but nor am I feeling very burdened by that weight. So it's just like, this is the weight I carry with me, and part of it is because I take life and questions seriously. So that's a certain weight, and it seems that I want to carry that weight with me, and I don't much miss the state of being completely free from it. And I
Mhm.
do actually quite a lot when I'm walking around, um, say in Oxford, in the city, and then going to my allotment and so on. I've often got a rucksack, and it's often got my laptop in it, and maybe some books or papers and things. It's a fair weight, and it is nice to take it off when I get to where I'm going. But that's it is similar to that. The sort of, because the thoughts that I have are like, there are questions I want to resolve. Um, Not maybe can never be fully resolved, but things I want to understand, say about history or about gardening, something, and then I seem to derive a lot of pleasure from trying to work out those questions in my head. And that's not quite the same as being completely in that the spirit just wants to live sort of state. When I said go for the wildest dreams in that song, I've got a very measured thing with regards to what I'm trying to achieve. And this is probably more so with age, that, oh yeah, things I'd like to do and get that done before I die. And then when you say before I die, this kind of like brings up the whole question of, will that be less alive or more alive or neither? This is kind of like I've got absolutely no idea about what death is or what it will be for me, what it will be like. I'm just assuming that it will happen to me just on the basis that the whole of our society, there are very few human beings who don't accept this is going to happen. So yes, because in one view, this people think this death could be a liberation into aliveness, and yet we have this idea of deadness, and so one of my dear friends, I would say, this is a dog, who died in December. And when I went back to my brother's yesterday, I got to the stream just below my brother's house, where I used to throw a stick in to the stream for the dog to go and retrieve, and then dog would do a sort of triumphal home lap with the stick in its mouth back to the house where it lived. It was my brother's dog. And yesterday, as I came towards my brother's house, I decided to do this in my imagination, throw an imaginary stick and imagine, as a way of sort of contacting this departed dog. And I wasn't sure if what I was doing was a good idea or not. It's kind of like, was it blasphemous or,
I somehow assume the dog was not religious, so at least who knows? Maybe there's something like a dog religion. I don't want to speculate too far, but that's I really, the one thing that happened while you were talking, especially in the last minute, is for me to get in touch with a flavor of aliveness, with a specific taste that, yeah, I've had on a number of occasions in my life. And I would describe it as feeling myself gently approaching, not running towards, but like, stepping one step at a time towards some kind of boundary or a membrane where in my inner experience of it, it does feel like some other kind of reality is behind the boundary, or is like on the other side of the membrane. And as I'm approaching it, yeah, there's it. I don't have taste buds in my chest, but there's a certain sensation in my chest that it has a sense of remembering. And there's, especially as I get really close to this boundary, on some occasions in my life, I've gotten much closer than like 2 minutes, 2, 3 minutes ago. Oh my goodness, there's such a longing to cross to the other side of the membrane, because it has this expectation that all of my troubles will be over, where everything that has ever bothered me on this side of the boundary will just fall away and will just be nothing. Like it really is like the ultimate lightness, where that which you describe as the weight of the backpack is no longer present in me. And there's really kind of this desire at times, especially the hard times, when things get really dark. There's such a desire to just be like, can't I take this fucking backpack off already?
That taste in your chest, is there a bit of excitement, tingling excitement that you're coming close to this thing? And is there
Yeah.
a fear that
No, well, I would call it's a bittersweet kind of taste, because
yeah,
there is the recognition. It's a one-way ticket. It's not, there is no more return, right? If I were to step through, and I guess, like without becoming technical, how I would step through, like which method of suicide my body would choose, including, if I could, maybe I would just stop my heart by force of will and say, I've had it enough. And my body would simply choose to step over. But there is a recognition it's a one-way ticket. And so there's a bittersweetness about it. It's really this kind of, as you said, there's a tingling, like over there's the good stuff. And the recognition, yeah, but what about the good stuff that's on this side?
yeah, and if it's a one-way ticket, then you might as well stay this side for longer because you still can go there.
Exactly. Like there is clearly also the recognition there's no hurry, there's no rush, because I will eventually step through or beyond this boundary, or beyond the membrane eventually. Yes. But there can be at times, especially when the weight, the backpack feels so fucking heavy. It can feel very, very tempting to just be like, okay, ooh, oh, to say thank you very much. This was a great ride, but I've had it. Right? I don't have to expose myself to the crap on this side any longer. Thank you. And I assume ultimately that when the body decides to die as a whole, right, where the heart and the brain and the lungs, they all come to the conclusion, you know what?
Time.
Yippee! Final breath. I think that's roughly like it, right? Where it's outside of my voluntary control, right? I don't have in that moment the even if I wanted to, I can't make my body go on any more like than what it feels like. This is it.
Oh, that was you leaning back to get a tissue.
It was.
Yeah, but it looked amazing to me because your hand came to the bottom of the picture that's behind you. And it didn't, it seemed to be like what you just been describing of this membrane. Like you were just kind of feeling the membrane.
That's cute. But yeah, like, so for me, for instance, yeah, remembering some living creatures, people and animals alike, that have been part of my life, and recalling moments that really felt connecting, particularly connecting, that can at times induce this kind of flavor, because obviously they have already kind of passed on. They are already on the other side. And I'm not suggesting that they are waiting there, right? It's not, I'm not making any claims about what it looks beyond that boundary. Who knows? Could all be like a black hole, a vacuum cleaner, and once you are sucked in, that's it. What do I know, right? But since they're no longer here, and I am, and I have the memory and really this kind of sensation of they were here and now they're gone. Yeah, I can also relate to how there may be some sort of like, yeah, you know, why can't I already also go there? And
Yeah, so it's interesting that the subject is aliveness and we're talking about death.
yeah, it's interesting for me because what I was talking about is not deadness. That for me is something entirely different, right? So for me, I would almost say pretending that that doesn't exist is for me one of the almost surest ways of getting to deadness. Because for me to choose to be alive is almost to know that this exists, but that I'm choosing to be here. I'm I'm really intentionally choosing to be alive every moment.
Could be getting to the point where there's nothing more to say.
Oh, I would just keep asking you, so what were some times in your life where, because so one of the things you said is that there seems to be a somewhat constant, or not constant, but like not too much differing sense of I'm alive in your experience. But I'm then wondering, is there maybe some other quality? So in the conversation with Helen, for instance, I used the word charge. And I don't know if you've ever, for instance, been particularly upset with someone where it came to like fist blows, where you got into a fist fight, where I would say, yeah, you probably still felt alive, but maybe there was still more energy or more desire to impact the world with force, something like that. And how much of that is like also this, how much does this color the sense of being alive, for instance?
Hmm. I managed over. I mean, there are a few incidents, but in general, I've managed to avoid violence, and probably the most incidents I can remember were there are very few, but they were where violence was done to me. Um, but I don't think I was severely damaged at all. And uh, I was trying to think of times that I've actually hit people myself. Um, uh, Actually, the person I just mentioned earlier, who I was speaking to in France, a woman who about my age, um, 50 years or more ago, I got cross with her and I slapped her cheek. And that, you know, when I've tried to think of when have I hit people, um, that was, it was almost the only time I could think of.
Mhm.
And but I still sort of feel, in retrospect, a bit ashamed of it, and that it was um, a woman rather than a man, so that it's like I'm probably too timid to do the same thing to a man. but I think I was angry with something she said, that it was like, I really can't remember, but it was something that I thought was, how can you be so, something like arrogant or something like that. But anyway, yeah, so I don't have that memory as being particularly alive. And also like one of the classic ones where I was hit was, I must have been, I fell to the ground. I must have been temporarily unconscious because I was kind of aware that I was being hit, but I didn't feel any pain. I must have gone unconscious. And the next, it was probably only a second or two, because the next thing I was lying on the floor. But it happened, we were in a shop, and this guy was wanting me to buy him some tobacco. And I had met him before, so he had reason to think that I might be friendly and helpful towards him. But when I said no, and he hit me, and apparently it was all recorded on the CCTV in the shop. I didn't bring any charges against him, or it's just like, I'm glad. I'm sort of, in retrospect, I could say I'm glad I had that experience, because I haven't had that kind of experience very much. And if I'd never had some experience like that, I'd be feeling I've been even luckier than I thought I was. It was kind of like, I mean, it's good to think about the sort of more extreme experiences, and so yeah. But so I'm glad it happened, but I don't. I think it's part of being alive, but I don't think it was. It made me feel more or less alive. And another similar thing, nothing to do with violence, but it's just when I was 18, and I first, second time actually, that I went on the road in Europe hitchhiking, and I took some money with me. I was going to go to university when I got back to England, and but as things worked out, I met all these people that were then called beatniks, living on a beach in the south of France, and I chose to spend my money on them, buying stuff for everybody, and I ran out of money, and eventually I ended up earning some money, picking in the grape harvest in France, and got home just running out of money again, enough to pay the ferry back. And but the moment when I and actually decided to spend my last few francs in a sort of cafe place, an outdoor cafe that I frequented, where they made fresh fruit juice. And rather than saving it up, I just spent the last francs and then walked out to a highway where I could start hitchhiking. And that was the first time in my life that I'd been completely and even later, I ran out of money a few years later in Europe, and I actually managed to phone my mother and get her to send me something. But at that time, I didn't even have the idea that there was any way I could contact anybody who was going to send me some money. So just that sense of being having no plan and being completely without money, that I would associate that with a great feeling of freedom and liberation. Or it could call it that I grew up at that point in time.
Which, like it's I could not have planned this, but it brings up for me this interesting conundrum about freedom that seems to come for people with the experience of having more resources, but also how having more and more resources also creates the need to control them and to protect them and to think about them, and to in the song that you started with, right, where you have bushels of cares, and where once you no longer have anything, sure, you don't have any resources, but there's also nothing to protect anymore, which is maybe an entirely different experience from, yeah, what I imagine pretty much, like maybe not when I was 4, 5, 6 years old, right? Before I got like pocket money or whatever, because I didn't have to worry about any resources back then. But very soon in my life, probably like, I don't know, age 8, 9, 10 at the very latest, I probably got like, I don't know, a Deutschmark per month, or like, I can't even remember, but like, something. And then, okay, what am I going to do with it? And start to thinking about that and getting attached to what I want to do with my money, as opposed to not having any and just be like, it's all good.
Yeah, no, I think it is a tool. They're both kind of liberations. So that I think um, when I got bits of money to spend when I was quite young, I did feel that was also growing up sort of thing. Oh, I feel grown up now. I can spend it on what I like. Um, and then again, when I retired, finally, this is now 13 years ago, and it meant that I have, being a UK citizen, I've got a pension, and it's actually I'm very poor compared to the population. I'm in the bottom 10% in terms of income, although I have got some wealth as well, which puts me a bit higher up. But I think the liberation there was, one, I don't have to think about earning money. And two, I don't have to work to earn this money. It's just coming to me. So that again, yeah, there was a nice feeling of a certain freedoms that I got rid of a certain burden that I hadn't even noticed. But that the burden that I got rid of was also kind of a liberating thing, because it was the sense that I could earn my own living. So each of those phases, from childhood up to old age, and then possibly death, as we were speculating, in each one there's a kind of liberation, um, and um, and a freedom, and then but then when you get rid of that, that's also a breeding. I haven't really thought about this before this conversation, but I'm seeing it now because we're talking about all these different stages in life.
And at least I'm reminded of some of the passages. In fact, the book that I was about to mention, or that I will be mentioning, I forgot the title, but it's like the Review of Human History by Graeber and one of the other people.
The Dawn of Everything.
Yes, The Dawn of Everything, and again, I've also read critiques of some of the what is critiqued as more anecdotal evidence, but where in the book there's this description of people who were kidnapped, if you will, out of Western society and almost like integrated into more tribal structures, and then who, even if then later given the chance to return to their like Western societal background, life, whatever, then refused or had huge difficulties reintegrating into this old life, where I imagine some of that might be going on, and where I am also now thinking back to my childhood, where my mother not every day, every week, but like on a number of occasions, I can at least think of 3 people with whom this happened, found and somewhat adopted a homeless person in the town where I grew up, where we had a house, and she brought this person into our household, not to get like one of our bedrooms in the house, but at least to get at least one a regular meal a day, sometimes 2, and to kind of tell the person, you can come here if you want, if you need a shower. And at least one of them, we had like next to our garage, like a little shed or something. And he decided, yeah, if I can stay here. And where I remember a few conversations with these people, and then also with my mom and dad about those people, where, yeah, like there was a recognition that once you fall, and I think like the German expression is literally, auf der Wald sein, to be out of the regular life on some kind of like much freer rotation, if you will, of life. And that once you get to that point in life, it really becomes somewhat difficult to readopt this kind of Western civic lifestyle of, oh, I'm holding on to a job and I'm paying rent, or I'm paying a mortgage, or I'm owning a house, and I have these kind of duties like chores, and I need to clean and laundry and this and this and this. And I have all of these kind of like structures around me that, yes, they probably increase my economic, like lifestyle or whatever, right? What the kinds of things that I can afford, but they also box me in, because every day there will be things that I have to do to keep it this way. And yeah, like, again, coming back to this song, pursuing one's wildest dreams. I do believe that for many people, there is an innate desire to explore possibilities beyond this kind of structured life that Western societies, or like any kind of larger society, offers. And yeah, like that, for better or for worse, the life that that most people are living on this planet is probably more structured than this kind of just wild pursuit of some dreams.
Yeah. Of course, Go for the wildest dreams can be misunderstood by people who think that's very ambitious. Yeah, it is. But what I was saying in the song is, you're not going to get your wildest dreams. Just go for them. You're not going to get there. But go for them. So it's like you could do that even while you were holding down a very routine job. I don't know. The thing you mentioned from the dawn of everything, it's quite an interesting little subject because I've studied this book a lot, and they gave a quote from Benjamin Franklin, who's pretty famous in America, I guess, one of the founding fathers, and that talks about people who sort of got captured by the Native Americans and then came back but didn't like it. But the authors of the Dawn of Everything, they actually give one source of evidence, and they take the Benjamin Franklin quote from this thesis, which is available online by a man called J.N. Hurd, and Heard, and in fact, they didn't look very closely at this guy's thesis, because what his conclusion was, he looked at lots of examples of people who'd been captured both ways, people who'd been captured by the Europeans from the Native Americans, and he came to the conclusion that if you were captured as a child, it didn't matter which way, you got to like the people who captured you. But if you were captured as an adult, it was more likely that you'd want to go back to the culture you'd come from. But I mean, there's more to it than that, because he had a lot more examples of the European children being captured by the Native Americans than he did the other way around. And also, there was a different story in the 18th century in the eastern states, rather than the 19th century in the western states, where the people like the Comanches had got like pretty wild and cruel, and they were actually fighting their last stand, really, against the Europeans. So then you had the European women, for example, were deeply terrified of the Comanches, because if they were captured, they would be raped, they would be enslaved to work, and there would be no chance of them getting back, because if they got back to the Europeans, they would be treated as dirt because of what had happened to them. So, yeah, you've got a lot of different situations there. And I'd recommend anyone to read that thesis, because it isn't conclusive. I think there is some truth in the idea, Graeber and Wengrow, that, or at least Benjamin Franklin seemed to see it that way, that there was something very appealing about the, I suppose you could call it, wilder lifestyle or more natural lifestyle or something like that, you know. But there was something very appealing about it. And there were kind of Europeans who went there, who did that as adults deliberately because they could see that they preferred that lifestyle. So it's quite a complex story, but the way that they put it in The Dawn of Everything is a bit like this was all it was always that way, and that's a bit they overdo that a bit.
Yeah, which at least so I'm curious if you have any experiences yourself talking with people from different cultures, or having, you went to France, at least. I don't know where else you have been that would have exposed you to different cultures. I imagine that, as you said, right? So if you are taken out of your culture of origin as a child, it is probably much more the norm to then still adapt and adopt and adapt to the culture in which you are taken, compared to as an adult. But that also speaks to me, yeah, that maybe different cultures really have very different markers for what it means to be fully alive. Whereas, I guess in a very industrial culture, maybe being particularly alive would mean to be rich and to be able to afford, like, Elon Musk style lifestyle. Then you can be really alive because you can do whatever you want, and you can buy whatever you want, and you can go wherever you want, and you can meet whoever you want. And right. So where that is like the ultimate freedom. And then there might be cultures where, no, actually being able to stand to get out of bed whenever you want and to hunt any animal you want in the forest, or that is freedom. But so I do want to just like recognize that. And this didn't come so much out in, no, like, in fact, I don't recall any specific mention of it in the conversation with Helen, that the experience of being able to pursue the things that my culture tells me are worth pursuing, whatever my culture actually tells me. But the experience that is possible, that I can pursue the things that my culture tells me are worth of pursuit, that creates a sense of fulfilled purpose or something. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, kind of. And that is what people seem to be doing, right? They're like, no matter where people grow up, if the culture tells them getting rich is the thing to do, or whatever the culture says, right? That is kind of like what creates this experience of like, I'm doing it right. I'm alive, on track. My life is on track in some way.
Yeah, well, for me, it is quite the opposite, really. And I've never been out of Europe, so I haven't really experienced. And I had quite a lot of my friends who were like hippies. They went on the trail to India, um, and whereas I had the thought, I don't think I've got anything to give there. You know, I haven't got, you know, they don't need me. I don't want to be just a tourist. And but yeah, so but my already before that, I'd already decided that the things I valued were not the things that my society valued. In fact, I definitely wanted to escape, uh, and but I only gradually realized what was possible. Um, Presumably, I don't think anything is impossible, but I gradually realized the things that I wasn't ever likely to be able to do. But yeah, and even as when I was so like 7 or 8, something, I had these fantasies. There was the Radio Times that gave you the, what was on the BBC television and radio for that week, and we had always had that in the house, and there were these little adverts in it for garden sheds, so it's something like 27 and sixpence, £1.30 or something like that. It is now. But of course, there's been a lot of inflation. And I had these fantasies. I thought, well, I could probably manage to get that amount of money and buy one of these sheds. And then could I possibly find a place where I could erect it, sort of thing, and live there? So I was quite interested in that idea. I had a fantasy about it. And that, I think that kind of thinking continued with me, but it became more like being a rebel, saying, no, the society's got it all wrong. that was a kind of a freedom to be that kind of rebel. It meant that I wasn't burdened by those things of having to have a career. It was more just like, how am I going to earn some money to live and then do this in the minimal way that I could learn?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's like this German expression just comes to mind where people say, entweder arbeiten zu leben oder leben zu arbeiten. So it's like you either live to work or you work to live. And I assume this is probably also like people say this in English. Although I don't recall that anyone ever mentioned it to me that way.
Probably, I mean, I've heard it vaguely, but not as a phrase. Yeah.
But one word you used earlier, and I'm still, or at least I don't know whether you used the word. No, you said about the potential to go to India, like this idea of, yeah, there's nothing to give. So I'm curious, when you use the word give, is that an expression of service to other people? Is that the kind of like desire behind it?
Be useful, or to feel that I'm being useful. I mean, I did have, at one point, I developed a plan which never came to anything, because it's really different from my character, you could say. But I was prepared. I was prepared in my mind to do this, to study the maintenance of agricultural machinery, because I thought, oh, then I can go anywhere in the world and I'm going to be useful. But that also means I've got an assured income. And I'm actually not a very mechanical person, so that's possibly one reason why it didn't work out. But just like the dream of having the shed when I was a kid, yes, so that's what I meant by, there's also this concept of, they call it cultural appropriation, where Western people take up some of the cultural symbols or clothing or whatever, or words from people they admire in the third world or wherever, and then it's criticized as this is just same part of as colonialism. It's just you're just extracting the cultural things from that those people. So I suppose that, yeah, I was, and the fact that also it was typical of me that if most of my friends had decided to go to India, that I would take a different tack as well, because I want to do something. Okay, they've done that, they're doing that, so maybe I should try something else. Maybe I should stay here. And I even expressed that to when I was at boarding school, all boys boarding school, and you had these people called prefects who were the senior boys who had a certain disciplinary responsibility, and there was something I'd done wrong, and one of these prefects was interviewing me, and he said, "You're the kind of person who goes off to South America and starts a revolution." And I said to him, "No, I'm not. I'm going to stay here and start a revolution." So yeah, it's kind of like little things you could just say in the heat of the moment, but they kind of maybe reveal something about what your life pattern is going to be. I, when I was 19 or 20, I think I was probably very um, kind of arrogantly certain of my rebellious ideas. Nothing wrong with that. I haven't changed. I've just become, I don't express them so arrogantly.
But again, like one of the words that you used, related to what I initially thought of as service, but then you like reflected back and used the word useful, because that is definitely something where I feel, for instance, in my work, and I'm using the phrasing "I feel more alive when," but maybe like one way of saying it is I feel more with regards to this path that I know ultimately I will have to step beyond the boundary, right? I know this. But while I'm here, while I'm on this side of the boundary, yeah, there's something I want to get done. There's something that feels is mine to do, is my purpose or whatever. And for me personally, and this is it, right? I think not everyone feels that the same thing is what is theirs to do. But for me, I am much more in this experience of I am fulfilling my purpose when I feel that other people can take what I am doing and it creates an experience for them of like, ooh, my life just got richer, easier, more enjoyable, um, more, more complex in a way where they enjoy the complexity. So not where it gets more complicated, but where they have more options. Let's put it that way, right? If I can go to someone and the person sees two options in a scenario, and after a conversation with me, he sees four. And there's this experience of like, oh, I have these two additional options I wasn't even aware of. Great. That for me, for instance, is a wonderful experience that I'm having. And so I very much resonate with the experience of usefulness in my life as like an important marker towards my life feels better. I feel more in my skin, or like there's a fit. There's a certain kind of fit between some vague sense of what my life could be and what I want it to be and what it is, right? So if there's if those two things get closer together, oh yes.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it made me think of another thing I did, and it's not something I've done very much, but it still made me feel good because it worked. And there was my friends had a son who was about 17 or something, and he was a bit confused about what he was going to do, and they actually asked me to have a chat with him, and I just gave him the sort of simple message that look, you know, I didn't say the world is your oyster, but something along those lines, saying you can do what you want to do. You may have to do certain things in order to make some money or something, but you don't have to follow one of these career paths at all. You know, I was just saying, trying to explain to him that life wasn't too difficult, and that I actually find it quite hard to explain it now, but somehow I managed to convey this to him, and it really set him on a good path. Like he'd somehow had the idea, either from his parents or his school or something, that there were things he was supposed to do. So I did for him what you were saying, like giving them more options. And I was, after that, I was, and I kind of heard about how he'd been getting along, and it seemed to be very good to me. So, and I kind of took some of the credit for that, even if I may or may not have deserved it. It didn't really matter, but it did make me feel good. But I've never taken up a sort of career or a voluntary role as a mentor for young people or anything like that. But even doing it that once, I remember that sort of a good moment. There are moments like that in other ways, you know, the little moments in my life where I've done something that worked and I was really pleased with. I didn't actually follow it up. I managed to I don't know, at a rainbow gathering, and I went to a talk about what they call Shantisena, how to deal with violent situations. I thought, oh yeah, quite interesting. Then the next day there was this guy, he was a crazy guy, and he was swinging an axe, and there were a whole circle of people standing their distance from him. And I thought, oh my God, you know, I only learned this thing yesterday, and now I've got this opportunity. I can't really not take it, even though I was basically quite scared of what I was going to do. But so I followed what I'd learned, and which was basically to go up behind this guy. He was surrounded by a whole circle. So I went up from behind him and just put my arms around his arms, and gave him a hug from behind. And I was, what I believed was that I've got to have no fear and no judgment of this guy. You know, I've just got to say, kind of with my body language, I've just got to say, you're lovely, I love you, sort of thing, and don't worry. And it absolutely worked. He dropped the axe, and someone else came and grabbed the axe. And it didn't solve anything for him. He was later um, taken away by some police who were called in. So he may not have had a good outcome at all. But I was sort of pleased, that I'd had the momentary courage to do something like that, and it worked. Um, but I didn't go around looking for other opportunities to do something.
Yeah. Yeah, I also looking for opportunities to prove myself does like, as in my imagination, does do nothing for me to feel like that's the path to go. Like, put on a superhero cape and fly around and like look for trouble. That kind of trope. It's just like, maybe for other people, but that's not for me. There's still one aspect I'm curious about with regards to aliveness. When you said about the dreams and go for it, but knowing that it's very unlikely, it's maybe even impossible, but go for it anyway. And where I feel, yes, like which is this almost irrational daring that seems to be a part of what life does, is to somehow find paths that cross what looks initially like an impossible to jump over gap. Like this kind of, when people say leap of faith, where I'm curious how much you sense that is a part, or can be a part of, really, connecting with this experience of aliveness. Because certainly I feel that the opposite of that, if I never dare, and if I never take any leap of faith in my life, that would, to me, suggest some form of deadness, where I'm taking things pre-manufactured as they are. I'm never going to question anything. I'm never going to be like, no, it's like, this is too dangerous. I'm just going to stay in my lane and whatever. Then I'm just like a little automaton. I'm just like a little mechanism that is like moving along the path of predetermination, and nothing is ever going to happen that feels particularly alive. So for me, part of what makes life interesting is that it leaves this path, what looks like predetermination.
Yeah. I also I don't beat myself up. So if I avoid doing something that's a leap of faith because I'm cowardly, I don't beat myself up for being cowardly. I, it's just that I agree that sometimes I have done, and exactly why or how that happens, I don't know. It's like I mean, one way of looking at it is the guardian angel theory. That your guardian angel is actually at those special moments gives you a poke, and you take the leap. Um, it's and then the rest of my time, I'm just like I, I don't see any reason to make that leap. Something because there's enough interesting things happening at my speed, um, rather than those moments. I don't think I took when I have taken those leaps of faith. I don't think they were because I was getting particularly um, too much into a routine or anything. They just happened, sort of thing, and it is almost like um, yeah, with the guy with the axe, it was a bit like a feeling of, oh, I've got to do this. You know, there's nothing. I've got no way of getting out of it. Uh, and you know, more recently, I've done this. I've been arrested a couple of times for political protest, which it was again. I worked it out quite rationally. It's kind of like um, I've got the right experiences behind me. I feel that it's the right thing to do, so I better do it. And it may even make me feel better. And it did. In fact, it has somewhat made me feel better. But I've had the option to go and do the same protest and get arrested a third time or a fourth time, and I've not bothered, not been bothered, because I've got to deal. I want to now deal with the consequences. I still haven't been, and it may be I'll never have to go to court because there are appeals going on and legal things going on. So, but it may be that I will have to. And so I don't particularly, having got two, I don't particularly want to have any more. So it's kind of like I've got a sort of smug thing. I feel satisfied with what I've done, and I try. I do like books, and you know, my father was the same. When I was little, I tried to ask him how had he got that military cross. He got a military cross medal. How do you got that military cross? Oh no, we don't like to talk about these things. You know, so he gave me a sort of lesson there that in my culture, at any rate, you know, you don't boast about your brave actions. But you know, the concept of privilege is very important to me as well. I think I had relatively, well, definitely by being born in England and then, you know, a rich Western country, and then also my family wasn't actually rich, but we were definitely not poor. We were sort of middle class, and my father owned a business, and he sent me to a fee-paying school, which didn't want to go to particularly, but my brother and I actually spoke to my father and saying that we can go to the state school and save you some money. And my brother certainly was thinking about the fact that it was co-educational as well. But our father just said, no, you've got to go, you know, to this school I send you. So that was that. But, you know, this thing where I'm saying, oh, I don't push myself to be particularly brave, not very often anyway, and it's the same with the general privilege I've got of living in a country that's not at war, and I have also inherited sums of money from time to time, which meant I had to do less work. And I use them that way. Rather than investing the money and hoping to increase my wealth, I just spent it on not working. Something saying my internet connection is unstable, but I don't see why. Oh, just a moment. I'll just have a look at my. Yeah, there is the right color on my hub, as they call it. So that's probably nothing important. It's anyway, yeah, so, I have taken advantage of my privilege and I'm not ashamed of it. At the same time, I've deliberately tried to live a simple life as regards being a consumer, so I can put that to my virtue signaling credit, something like I don't spend a lot of money. I'm trying to live in like what people call a green fashion, and but I'm also a hedonist, so I believe that to do that and get pleasure out of it is that's the sort of that contradicts most people's way of seeing, um, because they are to some degree in the rat race. And it was my privilege that I could rebel against my um, upbringing and escape from that rat race. And I do see that as a privilege, but I'm not deeply ashamed or guilty about that. I'm just like, um, come on, people, you don't have you could be more like me and have a good life.
Do you like I don't know how much you feel called to or like interested in exploring. So I at least recall twice you used the word pleasure during the conversation, and you just now used the word hedonist. And what pursuing pleasure almost for its own end, or like as its own purpose, um, how much that is really kind of in the foreground of your, I don't know, like life planning, or um because I mean I'm pretty sure I enjoy pleasures as the next man, and maybe I could take a couple leaves out of your book and learn from that a little bit, to dare to pursue at least certain pleasures a bit more intentionally.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I kind of see in my sort of philosophical approach to life, um, I think pleasure is the greatest value for humans, um, and it in other philosophies it is misunderstood. Like people think, well, your pleasure is someone else's pain. That's the kind of um, thing of, so you shouldn't follow pleasure. Well, it's not. I mean, in a cooperative situation, um, for one thing, you want the people around you to be happy, so they don't attack you or something like that. I mean, just to put it purely selfishly. So yeah, and I at one point in my life I decided to take responsibility for the whole universe, because I thought, well, I'm not saying them there whether or not there's a God, or whether or not there are, let's say, instead of a God, but uh, people who are so much wiser than me that everything's going to be okay because they're looking after everything. Um, but then I sort of thought, but maybe there aren't such people. So actually, it's up to me. Um, and so I say, okay, it could be just me. I So I take responsibility for all the bad things that have happened, but then I also get the credit for all the good things.
But speaking of a very heavy backpack, at least I have to admit, trying it on even for just like a second or two, yeah, being responsible for everything, that feels pretty heavy to me.
Yeah, well, the way it came to me, it wasn't like taking on a heavy burden. It was more like, oh, good, I've understood the secret of life. That it may just be up to me. Therefore, the way I need to act is not just to look after myself or my friends. I need to look after the whole universe, uh, if it's possible. I mean, it may be that my actions have no effect on the whole universe, so then that's fine. That will just be whatever it is.
Well, um, I certainly feel today's conversation with you already has some consequences on me. So, you know,
Yeah. Yeah, well, as long as there are consequences, of giving you more options rather than less, that's fine.
yeah, you know, as I said at the very beginning, my experience of you has generally been that you provide, in a kind of very, gently devious, playful way, another option for a perspective. And well, maybe as you told the prefect in your boarding school, right? You want to do the revolution at home, and what is a revolution if not like offering a fresh perspective on something?
Yeah, oh, that's a nice way of looking at it. I mean, obviously, I I, I only blurted that out to him. Later, I thought about revolution, whether it's a good thing or not, whether reform is better. Um,
Yeah, I don't necessarily mean like a bloody revolution where everyone who's currently in some position of decision making gets their head chopped off. That's I wasn't necessarily talking about that kind of revolution.
yeah. So yeah, so the word could have a lot of meanings, I guess. Uh, so I don't generally call myself a revolutionary, um, because it sounds a bit pretentious, really, isn't it? And quite dangerous, really, as well. It's kind of like, because it tends to mean that you're not really you're not really taking responsibility for the whole universe, because you're just saying, yes, let's do this and see what happens. Um, so, and that is a leap of faith. So that's why I've also got a very careful side to me. It's kind of like, um, in order to see whether what you're doing has any effect. Um, and I'm sure this can lead to delusion. So, like, if people think, um, can I just by thinking or by doing some little ritual, can I change, what's happening? The war in Iran or something like that. Could I do that? And so that going along that path could lead to a lot of delusion. Um, but I still think that I still like the sort of scientific idea whereby you try things out and see what the effect is. And you've got to be skeptical about that, because there could be so many lines of cause and effect. It's impossible to follow them all. But nevertheless, um, I kind of like what to do in this in any situation. It's kind of like, that is very interesting. And I haven't been presented with too many difficult situations. And that's partly because I've avoided them. So, or at least I've not been in a hurry to get into it. As a child, I was definitely very, very timid as a child. Sometimes it's not just the rough and tumble that I was avoiding with other children, but even the sort of psychological rough and tumble of what boys and girls would say that might freak me out.
Well, I don't have anything super specific that comes to mind right now. So, do you feel anything is still alive? Anything that wants to be added to the conversation?
We could certainly bring it to a close if you feel that's right. I don't really like the phrase, "Do you feel anything is still alive?" Because yes, I am still alive. I think you are.
Yeah, but maybe that is part of my experience of aliveness. There is something that wants to be expressed, and right now it feels I'm good resting. It feels at rest, feels like very pleasant without any desire to push or prod or poke or it's just like everything is good as it is.
Yeah, well, we've managed sort of 80% of 2 hours, I think. So that's probably good enough before we bore the tears. Because I watched quite a few of your friendship ones, and I find them all interesting all the way through. But it's just watching the intimacy of other people. It is very interesting, and it's not something that you often get to do. Especially if you know one of them or both of them, this makes it a little more interesting. There are also conversations on YouTube, which I have started watching and thought, this is horrible. This is no good. I don't want to follow this. So, but
Yeah, what about that? I have other people that they need to figure out if they like this or not. That's I enjoyed our conversation, Ed.
thank you. Yeah, I enjoyed it too. And publish and be damned.
Well, thank you very, very much for making the kind offer to participate.
Thank you for making the offer for me to participate. Yeah. And I hope you get many more interesting.
A few more, yeah. Like I have not committed to a specific number, so let's see. And then I think I'll see you on one of the next Sunday calls at Intentional Society, I hope.
I'll be at this Sundays.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Until then, Ed. Bye-bye.
Bye.